This hour, as you can see, U.S. President Joe Biden is calling on Congress to suspend some gas taxes. Let's listen in to the U.S. President.
I'm calling on the industry to refine more oil into gasoline and to bring down gas prices. Let me explain. I know my Republican friends claim we're not producing enough oil, and I'm limiting oil production. Quite frankly, that's nonsense. Here's the truth. Just this month, America produced 12 million barrels of oil per day. That's the highest, that's higher than average under my predecessor. And we're on track to set a new record for production next year. Plus, I've added to that supply of oil by releasing a record 1 million barrels of oil per day from what's called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. In fact, I just led the world to coordinate the largest release of global oil reserves in history, including from other countries. In total, that's 240 million barrels to boost global supply. And Republicans falsely claim that I'm blocking production on federal lands. But again, that's nonsense. Industry has more approved permits for production on federal lands than they can possibly use. That's a fact. My administration also directed the sale of gasoline using homegrown biofuels, ethanol, E15, this summer, which will boost gasoline supplies and lower the price at thousands of gas stations across America. And I welcome the recent announcement from what's known as the OPEC Plus, a group of nearly 24 oil-producing nations, to increase global oil supply. The bottom line is we are setting records in terms of American energy production. We're supplementing that supply with the release from our oil reserves. So the issue isn't oil production alone. The problem is the refining of that oil into gas at the pump. During the pandemic, some oil and gas companies shut down refining facilities. Last week, I sent a letter to the CEOs of the largest oil refining companies asking them to work with my administration to bring refineries back online to get more gas to the pump at lower prices. The Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, and members of my team will be meeting with many of these refining companies tomorrow. And I hope they'll come up to the table with some real ideas and practical steps in the near term. And I'm prepared to act quickly and decisively on the recommendations if they make sense to address the immediate challenge in front of us and the American people. Finally, when the cost of oil does come down, we need the price at the gas stations that they charge at the pump to come down as well. For example, in the last 2 weeks, the price of oil has fallen by more than $10 a barrel. Normally, this would reduce the cost at the pump about 25 cents a gallon. Yet, so far, gas stations have only reduced prices by a few cents a gallon. Some haven't reduced prices at all. I've heard plenty of explanations from companies and economists about why it normally takes time for these price reductions to reach the consumer. I might note that when the price of a barrel of oil goes up, it doesn't take much time for the price at the pump to go up. So let's be honest with one another. My message is simple. To the companies running gas stations and setting those prices at the pump, this is a time of war, global peril, Ukraine. These are not normal times. Bring down the price you are charging at the pump to reflect the cost you are paying for the product. Do it now. Do it today. Your customers, the American people, they need relief now. So let me summarize. Today I'm calling for a federal gas tax holiday, state gas tax holiday for the equivalent relief to customers, oil companies to use their profits to increase refining capacity rather than buy back their own stock, gas stations to pass along the decree, not the decree, but the decrease in oil prices to lower prices at the pump. And together, these actions could help drop the price at the pump by up to $1 a gallon or more. It doesn't reduce all the pain, but it would be a big help. I'm doing my part. I want the Congress, the states, and the industry to do their part as well. And let's remember how we got here. Putin invaded Ukraine. Putin invaded Ukraine with 100,000 forces. Just look at the facts. Since the start of the war in Ukraine this year, gas prices have risen by almost $2 a gallon in the United States and sometimes more around the world. But it wasn't just Putin's invasion of Ukraine. It was the refusal of the United States and the rest of the free world to let Putin get away with something we haven't seen since World War II. I said at the time, siding with Ukraine during the most serious aggression in Europe since World War II, defending freedom, defending democracy, was not going to go without cost for the American people and the rest of the free world. We were going to have to pay a price as well in the cost of military equipment, economic assistance, humanitarian relief, and sanctioned Russian banking industries. Russia is also one of the largest oil producers in the world. We cut off Russian oil into the United States, and our partners in Europe did the same, knowing that we would see higher gas prices. We could have turned a blind eye to Putin's murderous ways. The price of gas wouldn't have spiked the way it has. I believe that would have been wrong. I believe then, and I believe now, the free world had no choice. America could not stand by, and the West could not have stood by, although some suggested at the time, and just watch Putin's tanks roll in Ukraine and seize a sovereign country. If we did stand by, Putin wouldn't have stopped. Putin would have kept going, and we'd face an even steeper price. And it wasn't just me. The American people understood. The American people rose to the moment. The American people did what they always had done, defend freedom around the world. They chose to stand with the people of Ukraine. We had near unanimous support in the Congress, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, for supporting Ukraine, knowing full well the cost. So for all those Republicans in Congress criticizing me today for high gas prices in America, are you now saying we were wrong to support Ukraine? Are you saying we were wrong to stand up to Putin?
We were listening to U.S. President Joe Biden, who is presenting a plan to reduce gas prices. We heard from the president that he's calling for a gas tax holiday for a period of about 3 months. And he says he wants companies to pass on those benefits to consumers. We also heard Biden, as part of this plan, calling on the industry to refine more oil into gasoline. Part of what he said here, too, was pleading to companies running gas stations, saying this is a time of war, global peril. Bring down the prices at the pump to reflect what your cost is, because your customers, the American people, need the relief now. And we heard him there talking about how this has all been impacted, of course, by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. With that, I do want to bring in reporter Nick Harper. He was listening into all of that. He joins me now from Washington. So, Nick, what stood out to you in Joe Biden's presentation there?
Well, Arthur, very much a push there from the president to show that he has the American people's concerns at the centre of his current policy. Surveys consistently show that the high cost of living, inflation at a 40-year high, is the #1 priority for Americans at the moment, especially as we head towards November's midterms. The president knows that, and therefore he's trying to show that he is doing something to try and ease that pain. He also addressed some of the concerns that there seems to have been floating around this idea of having a pause on the tax for gas and diesel. There has been concern about whether it would really have much of an impact. Some analysts have said it would just be pennies at the pump that Americans were saving. The president, though, went on to point out that if the two things were put together, the federal tax was paused and each state went ahead and paused their tax as well, it could create a combined effect of about $1 per gallon saving for Americans. But there's also this concern that potentially, even if Congress goes ahead and approves this tax holiday, the gas companies may not pass on the saving to consumers at the pumps. They may just see this as a nice little tax break. The president said that. He said it's time not to be involved in profiteering, that it was important to pass on every penny of saving to the American public. So a big push from the president, knowing that he has a crucial midterm election in the coming months and trying to show that he's on top top of this problem where we're seeing gas prices spike at the pump.
But I guess, Nick, the question is, will legislators go for it?
Well, that's the big problem that he has here. He knows he cannot do it alone. He needs Congress to approve it. But in the run-up to this announcement, the message from lawmakers consistently has been that they are skeptical about it. Not just Republicans, but Democrats within the president's own party as well, including the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, one of the most senior Democrats. All of them saying that they remain skeptical about this, really saying that they only see it as a temporary fix. It doesn't really address the root causes of the problem. Interesting to note that President Obama was asked about a potential gas hike all the way back in 2008. He called it a gimmick to pause the amount of tax that people had to pay at the pump. And there is still this question of exactly how all of this would be paid for. This 3-month pause could cost about $10 billion in total. Now, the thinking was that the government was going to take this out of the Highway Trust Fund. That's the money for maintenance and building new roads, new bridges. The president just a moment ago said that that was not going to be the case, that his government could do both. He could pause taxes and also continue to pay for new roads. So still a question mark as to exactly where this money will come for, potentially creating a $10 billion budget deficit within the Biden administration's calculations. So it's something that will be difficult to convince Congress on. The president knows that. He knows the challenges ahead. But even so, here we are seeing him sticking out his neck and trying to do so because he knows that it could potentially pick him up a few votes ahead of November's midterms.
Thanks for this, Nick. That is reporter Nick Harper in Washington.